There is something ancient and primal about the wilderness. It calls to us, a gentle whisper on the wind, a promise of escape. We seek out these quiet places, vast expanses of green, vast expanses of brown. We pack our bags, we lace our boots, eager to leave the noise of the city behind. The trail beckons, a thin ribbon of dirt winding through towering trees, over rolling hills. We follow it. Peace, solitude, reconnection with something pure, untouched by human hands. But the wild has two faces. One is beautiful and serene, the other is something else entirely. We are drawn to the challenge, steep inclines that test our strength, long distances that push our endurance, a sense of accomplishment reaching a summit. Maps, compasses, enough supplies to last. We believe we are masters of our own journey, that we can conquer the mountain or the forest. We forget we are merely guests here, visitors in a realm with ancient, unforgiving rules. The silence of the woods is what we seek. Ringing phones left behind, yet this silence is not empty, filled with the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig. But listen closer. Sometimes the silence deepens, the forest holding its breath, waiting, a flicker of unease, a primal fear we are not truly alone. We believe we understand the dangers. We watch for bears, snakes. We are careful near cliff edges, mindful of changing weather. But what about dangers not listed on any map? Threats that don't leave tracks or follow patterns? The wilderness holds secrets older than any trail marker, stories of those who walked these same paths and never returned. Our first story takes us to the dense, sprawling forests of the Pacific Northwest. The year was 2011. The hiker was a man named Jacob Vance. He was not a novice. He was not a tourist with a flimsy map and a bottle of water. Jacob was 46 years old, a seasoned outdoorsman who had been hiking these same trails since he was a boy. He knew the woods like the back of his hand. He understood the terrain. He understood the weather patterns. He treated the wilderness with respect, but he never feared it. Perhaps that was his first mistake. He set out on a cool morning in early October. The air was crisp. Jacob planned a 3-day solo trek along the Skycomish River Trail, a route he had completed dozens of times before. He told his wife, Sarah, he would be back by Sunday evening at the latest. He packed meticulously, a sturdy tent, a warm sleeping bag, enough food for 5 days, a water filter, his trusted GPS device. The first day went exactly as planned. Before setting up camp near a small, gurgling creek, he sent a brief satellite message to Sarah, just as he promised. Camp set. All is well. Love you. It was the last message she would ever receive from him. The next day, he was expected to continue along the trail, pushing deeper into the rugged backcountry. Jacob was a man of routine, methodical in everything he did, especially in the wild. This is what makes his disappearance so baffling, so utterly chilling. He was not the kind of person to simply get lost. Something else happened to Jacob Vance out there in the deep woods, something that defied all logical explanation. When Sunday evening came and went with no sign of Jacob, Sarah began to worry. By Monday morning, her worry had blossomed into full-blown panic. They found his campsite easily enough. The tent was still pitched. His sleeping bag was neatly rolled up inside. His cooking stove and a half-eaten meal sat on a log, cold and untouched. His backpack was there, zipped open. Everything except his GPS device and his camera. K9 units were brought in. The dogs picked up Jacob's trail leading away from the campsite. The dogs led the searchers to the base of a massive ancient cedar tree. And there, the scent just stopped. It was as if Jacob Vance had been lifted straight up into the sky. For days, the search continued. They found nothing. No torn clothing, no dropped equipment. He was gone. Weeks turned into months. The official search was eventually called off, but volunteers continued to look for him. 2 years later, another group of hikers was exploring a remote, off-trail section of the same forest. They were navigating a treacherous, rocky outcrop when one of them spotted something wedged in a deep crevice. It was a camera. A digital camera, its case cracked and weathered from 2 years outdoors. Miraculously, the memory card was still intact. It was Jacob Vance's camera. The first few pictures were predictable. beautiful landscapes, shots of the trail, a selfie of him smiling by the creek. But the last 3 photos were different. They were terrifying. The second to last photo was blurry, taken in haste. It showed the dark interior of what looked like a cave. The final photo was the most disturbing. Taken in near complete darkness, the flash illuminated one horrifying image, a close-up of something pale and stretched, something almost like a human face, elongated and distorted, with huge empty eye sockets. Authorities could not explain it. Some said a strange rock formation. Others said a piece of bleached wood. The final image offered no clues, only a lingering dread, leaving a haunting image of what waits in the dark places of the wild. Our second story takes us to the rolling hills and dense forests of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It was a warm summer afternoon in 2014. The Miller family decided on a short, easy hike. Danny was energetic and imaginative. He often ran ahead, his bright red jacket a beacon against the greens and browns of the forest. As they walked, Danny seemed a little more subdued than usual. He kept glancing over his shoulder back into the deep woods that lined the trail. Laura asked him what was wrong. He shook his head and pointed into the trees. "The Shadow Man is following us," he said, his voice small and serious. David and Laura exchanged a knowing smile. They assumed this Shadow Man was just another character from his make-believe world. A couple of times he stopped dead on the trail. "He's still there," he whispered, clutching his mother's hand tightly. "He doesn't have a face." Laura knelt down and tried to reassure him, telling him it was just the shadows of the trees playing tricks on his eyes. The family reached a small clearing with a creek. For a few minutes, Danny seemed to forget about his shadowy follower. After about 15 minutes, David called out that it was time to head back. David went to get Danny, who was now hiding behind a large cluster of ferns.
"I'm playing with my friend."
David smiled. He walked closer, peering around the large green fronds. There was no one there.
"The Shadow Man," he said. "He's nice. He wants to show me where the berries are."
A cold knot tightened in David's stomach. It took David and Laura less than a minute to walk to the ferns where Danny was hiding. When David pushed the ferns aside, his son was gone. Panic erupted. They screamed his name. They searched the immediate area, their hearts pounding in their chests. No bright red jacket, no small footprints leading away from the creek. He had vanished completely. Within the hour, one of the largest search and rescue operations in the park's history was underway. Tracker dogs were brought in. The dogs led handlers to the cluster of ferns. Then the trail went cold. Searchers worked tirelessly for weeks. They found nothing, not a single clue. Local folklore resurfaced. Tales of the Tsul Kalu, a slant-eyed giant who stole children. Danny Miller was never found. His parents were left with a wound that would never heal, haunted by his final words. Or did Danny see something real in those woods? Did he make a new friend who led him off the trail into a darkness with no return? Our third story comes from the remote, windswept peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. The hiker was a young man named Alex. Alex thrived on solitude. He sought out the most challenging, least traveled trails, a place where you were truly on your own. For the first 2 days, everything was perfect. Alex felt exhilarated, alive. It was on the third afternoon that the feeling began to change, the kind of feeling you get when you think you are being watched. As evening approached, he set up his small one-man tent. The silence felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. It felt heavy, expectant. He awoke just before dawn to a sound that was not the wind. It was a soft, rhythmic scraping noise. He slowly unzipped his tent and peered out. The landscape was empty. He tried to rationalize what he had heard. As he shouldered his pack, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A series of deep scratches were etched into the side of the large boulder. They had not been there the night before. He started hiking that day with a new, urgent purpose. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. Several times during the day, he would hear a faint noise from the ridge above him, the clatter of a single, dislodged stone. Each time he looked up, he saw nothing. That night, he didn't bother making a proper camp. He just sat there in the cold and the dark, clutching his ice axe. The next 2 days were honestly just a blur of adrenaline-fueled fear. Alex abandoned his planned route and made a desperate push towards the nearest ranger station. He no longer heard just a single dislodged stone, but sometimes the distinct sound of something heavy moving on the scree slopes, always keeping pace. On the final afternoon, Alex was scrambling down a steep, treacherous gully. He slipped, ankle twisted violently. He collapsed, crying out. Helpless and exposed, a new sound reached him. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel, coming down the gully. It was no longer hiding. Heart pounding, Alex fumbled in his pack for his camera. He raised the camera, hands shaking, and pointed the lens up the gully. He never took the picture. At the last second, a different fear took over. The fear of finally seeing it. He just wanted to live and never looked back. Half crawled, half limped for what felt like miles, he then stumbled onto an established trail and was found by a group of hikers. He told rangers a frantic, disjointed story. They attributed it to altitude sickness and delirium. Alex knows what he experienced. Something followed him for days, and he only escaped because he was too afraid to look it in the eye. Our fourth story takes us deep into the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. For a group of 4 friends, Mark, Chloe, Ben, and Sarah, this forest was the destination for their annual camping trip. Their chosen spot was truly idyllic, a small flat clearing next to a babbling brook. As the sun began to set, they got a fire roaring. They sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. But on this night, as the darkness deepened, the profound isolation began to feel different. It felt heavier. It started late, long after they had retired to their tents. Mark was the first to hear it. It was a whisper. He gently shook Chloe awake. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. It was just a low, continuous stream of hushed tones. In the other tent, Ben and Sarah were now awake too. Ben quietly unzipped their tent flap just a crack. He could see nothing.
"Hello, is someone out there?"
For nearly an hour, there was only silence. But then, a new sound began. It started as a low whimper, like a lost child crying softly in the distance. Before they could even process the sound of the crying, it was joined by another voice, a guttural sob. Then a third sound joined in, a high-pitched, frantic wail. Soon, the forest was just filled with a chorus of disembodied voices. It was as if the forest itself was weeping around them. The friends were paralyzed by terror. It felt like they were listening to the final, desperate moments of 100 different tragedies, all playing out at once. The chorus of sorrow continued for what felt like an eternity. As soon as the first hint of gray light appeared on the horizon, they scrambled from their tents and practically ran the miles back to their car. They never spoke of what they heard. They had gone to the forest seeking peace and solitude, and instead they had become unwilling witnesses to the wood's hidden grief. Our fifth story takes us to the vast and unforgiving landscape of the Alaskan interior. It involves 2 brothers, Liam and Owen, both experienced backcountry hikers. They were on a challenging 10-day trek through a remote valley in Denali National Park. For the first 5 days, their journey was exactly what they had hoped for. On the 6th day, they saw something that just did not belong. Nestled in a small grove of scraggly spruce trees was a tent. But as they drew closer, a different feeling began to take over, a sense of unease. The campsite was eerily quiet.
"Hello, anyone here?"
The first thing they noticed was the food. A small bear canister was open. This was not the work of a bear. Inside the tent, the scene was even more chaotic. It looked like the inside of a room that had been ransacked. But what was most chilling was what they found at the back of the tent. The nylon fabric had been slashed open from the inside with a knife. Someone had been so desperate to get out of the tent that they didn't even use the door. They fled into the Alaskan wilderness with almost nothing. Whatever they were running from must have been more terrifying than the prospect of freezing or starving to death. Liam found a small, leather-bound journal. The final entry was different. A single, frantic sentence scrawled across the page. "It's not the wind. It has no face." The words hung in the cold air between the brothers. They packed up their own gear and left the phantom campsite behind. The fate of the campsite's original occupants remains unknown. They simply vanished, leaving behind only a scene of silent panic and a final, cryptic warning. Our sixth story takes us to the labyrinthine canyon lands of southern Utah. A group of 3 college friends, Maya, Ethan, and Jessica, were on a multi-day canyoneering trip. Their first day was filled with awe and adrenaline. The silence in the deeper sections was profound, almost sacred. As afternoon turned to evening, they found a suitable place to make camp and watched as the sliver of sky visible above them turned from a brilliant blue to a deep, star-dusted indigo. The wind began to pick up. It moaned softly as it passed over the canyon rim, a lonely, mournful sound. It was Maya who heard it first. Carried on a particularly strong gust of wind, a new sound sliced through the night. It was a scream, high-pitched, thin scream, heard on wind. She sat bolt upright. She looked over at Ethan. She looked over at Jessica, who were also wide awake. Then it came again. This time it was closer. It was a chorus of screams. A chorus of inhuman screams, echoes from the canyon. These weren't the cries of any animal they knew. They were inhumanly shrill, distorted. The friends huddled together on the sandy ledge. They felt trapped, cornered. The ordeal lasted for hours. Just as the first light of dawn began to touch the canyon rim high above, the screams ceased as abruptly as they had begun. Shaking and sleep-deprived, the 3 friends packed their gear with a singular focus: get out. Local legends of the area speak of the skinwalkers, malevolent shamans who can take the form of animals and mimic human voices. The friends don't know what they heard that night, but they know it wasn't the wind. It was the sound of something ancient and evil that haunts the deep places of the desert. Our 7th story comes from the dense, tangled woods of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. The hiker was a woman in her late 40s named Clara. She was an amateur astronomer and a passionate solo hiker. The first night was perfect. She spent hours gazing at the cosmos. The darkness was her friend. The second night, however, the comfort began to unravel. Clara was settled in her camp chair. She felt it, that primal sensation of being watched. It was then that she saw them. 2 small, faint points of light in the underbrush. They didn't reflect her headlamp. They seemed to glow on their own. But the eyes were too far apart for a fox, too low for a deer. They were utterly motionless. These eyes just stared. Clara quickly packed away her telescope. She retreated into her tent. After what felt like an hour, she cautiously unzipped the tent just a crack and peered out. The eyes were gone. She decided to stay one more night. As dusk fell, she built a larger fire than usual. Later that night, as she sat by the fire, she saw them again. This time there were more. First, the same pair appeared, then another pair to the left, and another to the right. Soon, the entire edge of the forest was dotted with them. A dozen pairs, forming a silent, watching semicircle around her camp. Panic finally broke her. She abandoned everything. Grabbing only her headlamp, she scrambled away from the overlook, running blindly through the dark. She ran for miles, until she stumbled out onto the road where her car was parked. She never went back. She was left with the haunting memory of those silent, luminous eyes and the chilling knowledge that when you stare into the dark forest at night, sometimes something is staring back. Our 8th story takes us to the Green Mountains of Vermont. The hikers were a young couple, Ethan and Olivia. They chose a popular 5-mile loop trail, a trail they had hiked once before. They walked at a leisurely pace, pointing out familiar landmarks: a curiously twisted oak tree, a large moss-covered boulder shaped like a resting bear. They reached the waterfall after about an hour and a half of walking. They stopped to eat lunch, enjoying the serene beauty of the spot. After resting for about an hour, they rejoined the trail. As they walked, a strange sense of monotony began to set in.
An hour passed, then another. It was Olivia who voiced their shared unspoken fear first. "This feels wrong," she said. Olivia, on screen. "Shouldn't we be near the car by now?"
Then they saw it. Up ahead was the unmistakable shape of the large moss-covered boulder, the same boulder they had passed hours ago. Confusion quickly gave way to a creeping dread. Determined to correct their course, they turned and began walking again. The forest no longer felt welcoming. It felt watchful, intelligent, like it was playing a game with them. And then, once again, they saw it. The mossy boulder loomed ahead of them on the path. The trail was not a path to freedom. It was a cage. As dusk settled, they gave up on the trail. They decided to head west. The forest fought them every step of the way. By some miracle, they stumbled out of the tree line and onto the asphalt of the road. They were a full 2 miles down the road from the parking lot. They were left with the terrifying realization that some paths are not meant to be followed, and that sometimes the forest doesn't want you to leave. It wants to keep you. Our 9th story takes us to the rugged and often treacherous White Mountains of New Hampshire. The missing person was a 28-year-old trail runner named Amelia Hayes. She was an ultramarathoner who trained relentlessly. She knew the risks of her sport and was always meticulously prepared. She sent her partner a text from the trailhead. "Starting my run. Weather is perfect. Love you." She was expected to be back at her car by mid-afternoon. When evening fell and she hadn't returned, her partner immediately knew something was wrong. The authorities were contacted, and by nightfall, a search and rescue operation was being mobilized. As the days stretched on, the search grew into one of the largest in the state's history. They found no sign of her. But 6 days after she disappeared, something incredible happened. A pair of hikers on a completely different trail found her. She was alive, she was physically unharmed, save for scratches and severe dehydration. But the woman they found was not the same one who had started her run. Her eyes were wide, vacant, filled with a depth of terror so profound it seemed to have burned out everything else. Amelia was airlifted to a hospital. Her physical recovery was swift, but the silence remained. Any attempt to question her was met with a violent, visceral reaction, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to burst through the walls. To this day, Amelia Hayes has never spoken about her ordeal, now lives a quiet, secluded life. What did she see in those woods that was so terrifying it stole her voice? A living ghost returned from the wild with a terrible secret locked away behind her silent, terrified gaze. Our final story is not about a single event, but a series of unsettling discoveries made over several years in a specific unnamed stretch of national forest in the American Midwest. It begins with a young couple, Ben and Emily, who were hiking an obscure, little-used trail in the late summer of 2012. About 2 miles into their hike, Emily spotted a splash of color in the undergrowth. It was a single hiking sock. But then, about 100 yards further down the path, Ben found the other sock, lying neatly on a flat rock. A quarter of a mile later, they found the next item, a t-shirt, carefully draped over a low-hanging branch. The trail of belongings continued. A pair of shorts folded on top of a log, a single hiking boot, its laces still tied, sitting upright in the middle of the path. It was as if someone was systematically undressing as they walked deeper and deeper into the woods. The items were not discarded carelessly. They were placed with an odd sense of purpose. Ben and Emily reported their strange findings to a park ranger, who seemed troubled but unsurprised. Other hikers had reported finding trails of abandoned items, clothing, gear, backpacks with food still inside them. The most disturbing detail, no corresponding missing persons reports. When full backpacks or expensive gear show up, authorities try to trace owners, but the items are unidentifiable. A local legend grew. They say something in the forest calls to people, a lure irresistible to certain wanderers. This entity does not want your gear or supplies. It wants you. To enter its realm, you must be stripped bare. If you're hiking and spot a single sock, but find its mate, then a shirt, then a shoe, do not follow the trail. Turn around and walk away. Because whatever is at the end of that path is not waiting to be rescued, it is waiting for you. We have walked a dark and winding path through these 10 stories. They are echoes of a fear that is as old as humanity itself, the fear of what lies beyond the safety of our firelight. The wilderness we seek for peace and beauty is a realm of profound indifference. It does not care for our plans. For every story of a successful hike, there is another story whispered in the shadows. These accounts remind us that the world is far larger and more mysterious than our modern lives would have us believe. The greatest dangers in the wild are not always the ones we prepare for. We pack bear spray and snakebite kits. But how do you prepare for a path that loops back on itself? How do you defend against a voice that has no body, or a pair of eyes that watch you from an impenetrable darkness? They suggest that there are forces at play in the wilderness that are not animal, not human, and not natural. So the next time you feel the pull of the wild, remember these stories. The next time you stand at a trailhead, listen closely to the silence. You might just hear the echo of what waits within, because the path you choose may lead to breathtaking beauty, or it may lead to a place where the silence is broken by whispers. Where you learn the most terrifying thing is discovering you have never been truly alone and that you are not subscribed to tales from the fiend.